welcome to early evening Rotterdam. Behind me you can see the Ahoy Sports Complex, and the reason that we're here is because Lou Reed is playing in concert just a bit later, and what do you know, the great man himself has asked us in for a few words, which is a great pleasure indeed for us because he only gives interviews on very rare occasions. Okay, well we started with Strawberry Switchblade, and the reason we put them at the head of the programme is because they're both great Lou Reed fans. And if you check out the 12-inch version of that single, Since Yesterday, you'll find an old Velvet Underground number, of course Lou Reed's old band, called Sunday Morning. Interesting, eh? And we're going to carry on with some more videos now before I go into the concert hall and have a few words with Lou Reed. This is the Human League and Louise. I can drag you back to the days of the Velvet Underground in the late 60s. The group were formed at the time that the Summer of Love was going on, and indeed all the hippies were making themselves heard over there in America. It seems to be that you've always wanted to go against the grain somewhat. The Velvet Underground certainly went against that kind of grain of love and peace at the time. Would you say that was a fair summation of what you were about?
I guess at the time that's the way it worked out. I was really interested in writing, and I had been studying with a guy named Delmore Schwartz, and I was reading a lot of Raymond Chandler. And there was a certain direction that I was interested in, and it didn't, as it worked out, have anything to do with these other things that happened to be going on at the same time. I mean, we were never part of anything, as it turned out, and what we did seemed to go against the grain, but I didn't set out to go against the grain. I mean, the idea wasn't, well, let's go do the opposite of everybody else. I mean, the idea was we were going to do this particular thing really well.
You soon became involved in a pretty tight coterie of some fairly famous people like Andy Warhol, for example. How much influence did they exert upon you in those days?
I don't think they exerted any. They were involved in visual things. The influence that he had was that it made it possible for us to do what we were doing. And, you know, sometimes he might say something like, oh, that's a really great song, you should make sure you do that song, something like that. But it ended there.
Do you ever feel a need to collaborate with other people, though? Because although you deny maybe Warhol's influence, certainly Bowie was to have an influence on you around about the time of the early 70s in the Transformer LP. Was that always a need for you to actually get together with somebody else and bounce ideas off them?
I don't know that David Bowie had any influence on me other than the fact that he co-produced the record. I like working with other people sometimes. It's a lot of fun. They bring, well, it seems trite, but they bring themselves to a project. For instance, something I really enjoyed doing was Nils Lofgren and I collaborated on some songs, and that was really like a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed working with David and Mick Ronson on the Transformer album. That was a lot of fun too. I liked working with Bob Ezrin on Berlin. Sometimes it's fun to just go out and be with someone else and see the ideas go in different directions. You know?
Groups that have sprung up in your wake have cited you as something of an original talent, and I mean, you've even been called the godfather of punk, for example, and a lot of modern-day groups like Simple Minds and Eurythmics.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever that means.
Yeah, exactly. What I wanted to ask was, is that a cross for you to bear, or is it something that you're fairly flattered by?
I assume it's a compliment, whatever it means. Whatever it means. And so I accept it, and what I assume is the spirit that it's given.
Okay, let's turn then to your latest LP, New Sensations. In fact, I think, like a lot of your latest stuff, it signals maybe a departure for you in some ways, in that you've matured a lot as an artist. Do you think you've changed a lot over the years?
Well, I think as you get older, you change, hopefully for the better. I think I've worked really hard on improving my writing. And with the New Sensations album, I was really interested in certain kinds of sounds, namely the bass, the drum, and the guitar, which is, you know, basically what that record's all about, a certain kind of guitar sound. And along with that, a certain kind of bass drum sound that you hear on records all the time now. but I hadn't gotten in on my records, and I really specifically wanted to get that kind of a sound, and I got it. I mean, for whatever it's worth. That's when I went into the studio for New Sensations. Basically, wanted to do. I wanted to play all the guitar parts. I wanted to get a very big guitar sound that wouldn't scare anybody, like not overloaded or heavy metal, and use a drum machine to get a very big drum and very big bass, and have a very big sound that wasn't empty though, you know, because there's very few instruments really on the album.
Another thing I really wanted to ask you about in the wake of that was the kind of influences that you draw upon now for your later material. They certainly seem to be very different from the stuff you were drawing on 10 and 15 years ago. What sort of things do you look for now to write about?
Same things I looked at before. People who are around me, movies, newspapers, stories people tell me, things that I see. So I always thought of myself as a writer, just, you know, not just introspective. You know, I think if it was pure introspection, it would get very deadly. So I was always writing things in first person as though it's always me, but it's not always me. And sometimes it would be her, him, this, that, you know. And I would combine people. Like something happened to that person, something happened to that person, and make it like one person.
Yeah, you often deal with the uneasiness between human beings, between men and women, or between friends. That has been something that's kind of continued right through your writing, hasn't it? Would you still say that was true now of your latest stuff?
I wouldn't call it the uneasiness. I would call it the relationships people have between themselves. Like, just my songs almost always about something happening to somebody, or somebody doing something to somebody else. It's like something happens between two people that causes an emotion in the song. You know, either the situation or someone is always doing something or something's happening to them. And I don't know if I'd call it uneasiness, or just say it's like a realistic look at the way things are.
But it seldom seems to go smoothly, does it? I mean, the plot often does.
I don't know about that. Sometimes it does. It's like real life. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think, generally speaking, it's just like with a movie. It's more exciting when things don't go well. You know, as a viewer, you wonder what's going to happen, how's it going to go.
Would you say that your writing's become more direct? If you look at a track like I Love You, Suzanne, it is a fairly straight-ahead, quite uncomplicated song.
Yeah, I find those really very difficult to write. I don't stumble across them that often. That particular song wasn't even going to be on the album because it was so easy. And I was going to put another song with like more words, and my wife Sylvia said to me, she said, "You have to be really crazy. You have to be crazy if you don't put that on that. That's one of your great songs. That's a really great fun song. And you shouldn't just dismiss it like that." The thing is, what I came to realize about songs like that is I can't just sit down and write something like Suzanne. I really can't. That's one of those ones that they seem so easy and they're not. I mean, it's easy to write when you sit down and write it. It takes, as long as you hear it, that's how long it takes to write it. But the fact of it is, the riff, the thing that makes the song work, comes from nowhere. And I can't make it happen. So I couldn't turn around and write 10 more Suzannes for the next album. I couldn't do it, even if I wanted to do it, which I don't, but even if I wanted to, I couldn't do that because it's just one of those things that was just floating around and you happen to tune into it one day. I mean, I had that thing in my head for 6 months before I wrote it. And I would sit in my room and I would play it over and over just because I liked it so much. I just liked doing that silly, stupid thing over and over. I got a lot of pleasure out of it. Da, 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 da. Over and over and over and over. And then all I do when I record is that's like a lot of guitars doing that. And it's mixed together. It doesn't seem like a lot of guitars, but in fact it's a lot of guitars just going over that riff more and more and more, more and more and more. Each time the song goes around, you know, it's like, I don't know how to count bars, so I couldn't tell you in musician language, but each time it makes a pass, like one whole turnaround, another guitar comes in. So by the end, it's like, you know, there's a lot of guitars. It sounds kind of like the Birds when it's going out, that kind of thing. But I would play that for hours. You know, it's in the same key. I only write really two keys, you know, D and E. And it's in the same key the Heroine's in.
Are you...
Last question?
Okay. When you've actually written a song, are you immediately happy with it, or do you go back and work with it? I mean, you've written a number of classics in your time. Are you aware that when you finish writing that song, that it is something special?
I think they're all special. I get... my favorite record is always the last record, because I really do love them. And I really love all the songs on them. I really do. And each in a different way, maybe some a little more than others. And I rewrite a lot. I do a lot of rewriting. I'm very quick, but nonetheless, I do a lot of rewriting. Some of the problems sometimes are that I can't sing and play the song at the same time. And so I have to try doing that for a while, because I don't know the words yet. And it's like when you take a song out on the road for a half a year, then you can sing and play it really right, and then you say, geez, if I was in the studio now, I'd really knock that sucker off.
Great, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Well, I certainly enjoyed talking to Lou Reed about his early stuff with the Velvet Underground and his latest solo stuff as well. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We've got to make ourselves scarce here on Music Box, because the hall is filling up at the Ahoy in Rotterdam, and in fact we're getting in the way. So I'll see you again on your favourite music channel very soon. Hope you enjoyed Lou Reed. Stick around for a lot more on Music Box.